Hello everyone. So Nars has just reintroduced their classic powder blush. And what they did was to add some shades to the marketplace, and they also removed some shades from the marketplace, and they slightly changed the packaging, but they also reformulated them. And part of what they did is to take out the talc. And so I know that some people are kind of concerned about that because they have seen other blushes reformulated in the past and things have not gone well when they have done that. So for instance, Dior last year reformulated both their eyeshadows and their blushes to remove the talc, and a lot of people were much less happy with the new formula than they were with the old formula. So I thought that it would be worthwhile to pick up a few of these blushes and to talk about the reformulation and to try them out and to let you know what I think of them. So I decided for this video to focus on blushes that are appropriate for lighter skin tones. So I recently have been trying out the new Haus Labs blushes, and that is such a wonderful formula, but they are very, very pigmented blushes, and that makes it a little bit difficult for me to work with, and I think that if I had lighter skin, then it would be even more difficult. And also, since I already am really happy with the RMS blushes in terms of the amount of shimmer that's in them, I felt like for this line I would focus on lighter blushes that are not shimmery. So the ones that I picked out, first of all, is the new Orgasm Edge, and this is basically the old Orgasm shade but without any of that gold shimmer in it, so it's more like a matte. And then I also have a shade that's called Sex Appeal, which is a very light peach color. And I have one that is called Gina, which is more like a very light tangerine color. And then at the end of the video, I will be using these new blushes as part of a quick 5 or 10 minute makeup look using pretty much all Nars products. So first, a little bit of information about me. I'm 59 years old and I have dry and very sensitive skin. And I have never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery, and I don't intend to do that. And so my hope is that by using good makeup and good skincare, I can look a little bit fresher and maybe even a little bit younger. And over the past 3 years, I've tried more than 1,000 makeup products, and so I have a pretty good basis of comparison for everything that I discuss on this channel. One thing that I've found out is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my skin, and I know that these are ingredients that tend to be very irritating for other people as well. So I just don't talk about products that contain those ingredients on this channel. So although Nars makes many different makeup products, I think that they may actually be best known for their blush, and in particular for a shade of blush that is called Orgasm. So this is kind of a peachy pink shade that has a fairly strong gold shimmer in it, and this was introduced in 1999 and it became very popular for quite a long time. And then they launched a whole bunch of other products that are also supposed to be related to this color. And I was really not interested in makeup at all prior to about 3 years ago. But even I knew what Orgasm was, in large part because Meghan Markle said that this was her favorite blush color. Now, one thing to know about Nars is that they have made some really significant changes in their products over the past 3 years, starting at the beginning of 2022. So it used to be the case that I really wasn't able to use any products from Nars at all, and that all of the products really did include ingredients that would irritate my skin and not be appropriate for me. But since the beginning of 2022, everything that they have launched, and there have been a whole bunch of launches, they've all been terrific for me, both in terms of how the ingredient list look and also in terms of how they have performed for me. I haven't found anything that's been new that has irritated my skin, and it also is the case that all of the products have worked really well for me and been ones that I have really enjoyed using and want to continue using. So Nars is not really the only company that is going in this direction. I think that a lot of mainstream companies are becoming much more cognizant of what kinds of ingredients they have in their products, and that the clean beauty companies are trying to become a little bit higher performing. But without very many exceptions, I think that all of the brands that are out there, I can only really feel good about using some of their products, either because they're putting in ingredients that do irritate irritate my skin, even if they're not considered to be not appropriate for clean at Sephora. I still can't tolerate them, or because the performance is not very good. And in this case, I think that they've done everything really well. So this is really my favorite clean beauty, quote unquote, company at this point. And if we look at how Nars has been doing this compared to how other companies have been trying to change their ingredients in their products, I think that Nars has been doing a terrific job. So for instance, Dior recently last year reintroduced their blushes and their eyeshadow. And a lot of people were really unhappy about that and feel that the old formulas were a lot better. And the way that Dior did it was to just simply replace the products and not mention the fact that they were talc-free, and not even mention the fact that they were being reintroduced. And then when people found out about it and they felt like the products were not performing very well, then in a lot of cases people are kind of annoyed about that. And in the case of Nars, they've done it quite a bit differently. So what they have mostly done is just introduced entirely new products that really did, in my opinion, perform very well, and just introduced them to the marketplace without talking about anything to do with clean beauty at all. And in addition, the products that they have removed from the marketplace are ones that just were not very well performing in terms of sales anyway, and so people did not really miss those products very much. And I would say that at this point, 2.5 years in, I would say that there's an awfully lot of products on the Nars site that are really perfectly fine for me and that I feel perfectly good about using. Now, you do need to navigate your way through there because there are a lot of older products that I still don't want to use, but it's really becoming a very well fleshed out group of products that I am really impressed by. Now, another thing that people are kind of annoyed about in terms of some of these reformulations of the products is that in some cases they have really reduced the usage life on the products. So in some cases, for instance, they've gone down to like 6 months, which is really kind of a ridiculous thing in terms of wanting to use up an entire blush or eyeshadow palette. So I think that that's really not doing anyone any favors by putting out products with that kind of a usage life. And I think that if a clean beauty product, quote unquote, is formulated in a smart way, that this is not going to be something that is going to be necessary. So if I look, for instance, at Mob Beauty, none of their products have a 6-month usage life, and they are all really high quality, and the ingredient lists are really excellent. And that is the case with these Nars blushes also, that they have the same usage life that they did before, which is 12 months. So I don't think it's really right to have there be a dichotomy with the idea that I don't like clean beauty because you have to throw the products out right away. I think that you certainly can make a product that will last for a longer period of time depending on which ingredients you choose, and that a good makeup formulator can do that. It's actually a little bit perplexing to me why a powder blush or a eyeshadow would have a really short usage life anyway, because I think that in most cases powder products are simply not going to get contamination like that, and certainly not within a short period of time. If you're talking about things like foundations or anything that has water in it, then you do need to have some kind of preservatives in it to keep it from going bad. But powder products tend to be very stable over time. Now, I think that what does happen in some cases with powder products that don't have talc in them is that in some cases they do tend to get dried out. And so the performance that you get right away when they first come from the factory may decline over time because they don't have that smoothness and easy to put it on because they're more dry than they used to be. So that is something, for instance, that I found with the Jane Iredale eyeshadows, that when I first got them, when they were first introduced right from the factory, they are absolutely fantastic. But then even 6 months later, they were still usable. It's not that I can't use those products, and I still think they're better than most eyeshadow products on the market, but they're just not as much fun to use. So I wonder if when those companies label things as being a 6-month usage life, that they are really just protecting themselves from people complaining that the eyeshadows are not as much fun to use after a certain period of time, or because they want you to buy new ones all the time because they think that's going to increase their profits. I'm not sure. But in any case, I think that it is very possible to make products that have really good ingredient lists and that last for at least a year or two after you open the container. So one thing that I really like about Nars is that I feel like their definition of clean beauty or whatever it is that they're doing is similar to mine. So for instance, when we look at the definition of clean beauty for Sephora or for Credo or for many of the clean beauty companies that are out there, they are still putting synthetic fragrances in their products. They are putting natural fragrances in their products, which I often cannot use. For instance, I'm reactive to rose geranium oil. They are often putting aluminum powder in their products. Sephora actually allows that in their Clean It Sephora products. Credo does not. They're often putting chemical sunscreens in their products, or sunscreen boosters, which are unapproved chemical sunscreens. And so there's a lot of ingredients in some of these products that are really irritating for my skin and that are very irritating for many other people's skin. And I'm not sure why that qualifies as clean beauty. I think that that's not my definition at all. Whereas everything that Nars has introduced over the past 2 years, they haven't put any of those things in the products, and I have done great with all of them. And I think that there's an awfully lot of other people out there that would do really better with a lot of the Nars products than they would with a lot of the other products that are on the market. Even though Nars is actually doesn't have a Clean It Sephora seal, because in order to get that seal, you have to have every single product that you are selling qualify for that. And in the case of Nars, they only have some of the products that would qualify. Now, in the case of the blush, Nars has been a lot less quiet than they had in the past. So rather than introducing a new line of blush that's different and then eventually phasing out the old blushes, they did it all in one full swoop. So they took all of the old blushes off of their site. You can't get them on the Sephora site anymore. And they introduced all new blushes, and then they changed the colors at the same time. And they did actually announce that they were making that change. Now, if you want to get the old blushes, either because you want one of the old colors or because you want the old formula, then I would suggest that you head over to the Nordstrom site very soon, and I'll put a link for this in my description box. And they do have pretty much all of the colors left there, and it's like a 15% discount or something. So never fear right now, but now or never, I guess. So what we have here is a bunch of different Nars blushes, some of which are the older blushes that are still in the new line, some of which are the older blushes that have been discontinued, and then the new blushes that Nars has introduced as new colors. So I think that it is the case that of the new blushes, 9 of them are new colors, and that there's a variety in terms of their appropriateness for different skin tones. 2 of them are related to orgasm. So one of them is this Orgasm Edge, which is the one that does not have the shimmer in it, but it seems to be otherwise the same color as the original Orgasm. And then I think that Orgasm Rush is a new color, but this one actually was also available in this Foreplay palette, which is a different formula. This is a Baked Gelée formula, and it is still available on the website. But I think that this color here is the Orgasm Rush. So I'll swatch that one. I don't have it in the new formula, but I'll show you what the color looks like. And on the website, they are just showing this on darker skin tones. They're not even showing it for anyone that has a lighter skin tone like mine. So I'm not sure how well that this works on most people. I don't think that I would probably wear this very often, but I saw someone say that they thought that they really liked it who had skin tone like mine. So some people are a little bit more adventurous about blush than I am. And I realize that I do have all 4 of the shades that have orgasm in the name because I have a couple of minis in addition to that. So what I have here on the top is the original Orgasm, then I have Orgasm Rush, then I have the new Orgasm Edge, which is the one without the gold shimmer in it. And then at the bottom is one that's called Orgasm X, which is supposed to be for somewhat darker skin tones. And I think that that's the same concept as Pillow Talk Medium, that it's supposed to give the same look but on darker skin tones. So one thing that I think I have seen in the makeup community is that people may be becoming a little bit sick of the entire orgasm concept. And I think a little bit of this has to do with the name. I think that when that name was introduced in 1999. It seemed a little bit more edgy, and that right now, at least some people think it's a little bit crass or don't feel entirely comfortable using all of these sexualized words a lot. Personally, the only one that I really have an issue with is the deep throat one, because it's my understanding that in that movie that Linda Lovelace was in an abusive relationship with her husband and that he made her film that movie. And so that makes me really have a bad taste in my mouth with regard to that particular shade name. For a lot of people, that is one negative thing, but I think for a bigger thing is the fact that this particular shimmery color with the gold and the peachy pink coral type of a shade, I think that that just was so widely used and it's so associated with 20 or 10 years ago that a lot of people have just kind of burnt out on it. And I do feel that when I took it out of the case the other day and put it on my face, I do feel that it was starting to look quite a bit dated to me. However, I do think that this peachy pink color is actually kind of nice on me. And I am a little surprised at how few other companies actually make blush colors like that. You know, it used to be the case that Rosemary Swift from RMS, that she had a shade of powder blush in the old blush line that was called Lost Angel, and I thought that was very similar to Orgasm but not quite as shimmery. But there was nothing like that in the new RMS blush lines. And at the time when they came out 2 years ago, I'm like, where'd that blush go? But now when I look at the RMS blushes, they look very modern to me. At the time, they looked like they were a little bit odd to my eyes. But now I think that they were very forward-thinking with regard to that. So I've been trying out this new Orgasm Edge, and I think that this is actually very natural looking on me. It actually looks like what my skin would look like a lot of the time if I were just blushing naturally. I think that the shimmer in it did look very artificial, and that is really kind of obviously dated when I wear it, whereas this color is just, I don't think that you can have a natural color that your skin looks like and then have it be out of fashion. So regardless of whether or not you like this new name, I'm actually kind of happy that they released this particular blush shade, and so I do intend to use it coming up to see if I like it, and I might even buy a larger version of it. Now in terms of these minis, I think this is a very nice thing for them to have done, but they only do have the original Orgasm and this Orgasm Edge in the mini. So that is too bad, because I would have probably picked up a number of other shades if they had others in the mini shades. Now I will say that when I looked at the footage of me putting the Orgasm on one side of my face and the Orgasm Edge on the other side, it's really hard to tell in the footage. I think that even if you have really good light like I do in terms of natural light, I think that the camera doesn't really pick up that kind of gold shimmer as much as you can get in real life. So I think that we all know what Orgasm looks like, so you probably know what I'm talking about. But it definitely is the case that it looks different when it's matte. So here are all of the new shades that Nars has put available, and you can see which skin tones they are showing them on is probably most appropriate. Anybody can wear anything. And the one shade that I didn't get that I wish I had gotten now is called Forbidden, and that one is also kind of a peachy type of a shade that I think would be interesting to compare to the Gina shade. And then the other shade that they are showing as being particularly appropriate for people with really light skin is the Deep Throat shade. They are not putting that on darker skin at all. That one is more of a pink rather than a peachy pink to my understanding, but that does have some shimmer in it also. And it was my feeling that I wanted to stick with the matte shade, so I didn't get that one. And then Behave is a kind of a light pinky mauve type of a shade, and that one seems to be very popular too. So I might be interested in taking a look at that one as well. And then they also have one of those really popular shades at the moment, which is a pink, but it's a light pink and bright and almost leaning a little tiny bit purple. And so I don't know that that kind of shade looks that great on me, but I think there are a lot of people with cooler skin that are very enthusiastic about that, so they've added that as well. And so now I shot some footage of me putting the two other shades that I have on my face. So I thought that I would try putting on one side and one on the other side, but I think that you really can't see this sex appeal. certainly not on the screen, but really even in real life, I think this is just not showing up on my skin as blush. So what I did is put that on one side, and then I put the Gina on the other side, and then I ended up putting the Gina on both sides because I think that Sex Appeal is supposed to be a shade that is very good for people with very, very light skin. And I have heard that there are certain, especially Korean influencers on TikTok or maybe YouTube, that really, really like that shade because their skin is very light. And I think because it leans a little bit peach. And there's also other people that, again, have very pale skin that I think might do well with this. So if that is you, then this could be a shade to take a look at. Now on my skin, it really does disappear. When I try to use it as a blush, it doesn't really look like I have any particular flush. But what I do think that when I look at this, what it really looks like is a pink powder, and I actually become a fan of pink powders recently. After I first started using the Jones Road pink powder, I really decided that pink powders are very nice on my face. I think that what they do is, especially if I'm not looking as healthy, if I'm looking a little bit sallow, which I think a lot of times women who are older, they do start to look a little bit more sallow because there's not as much blood flow to the surface of the skin, and so therefore a little bit of brightening can be a nice thing. And it also is the case that with this foundation that I'm using right now, which is the Nars foundation in the shade Salzburg, so I think it's a little too yellow for me, and so therefore I think a little bit of pink powder added to it is a good thing. And I've been interested to find that this actually works fairly well as a pink powder, and that it seems to be pretty finely milled. So this powder blush actually has a little bit of kaolin clay in it. I think it's the second ingredient actually. And so what I have found is this is actually fairly oil absorbing. I think that is why it's supposed to stay in place for a long period of time on the skin. And depending on the circumstances, I think that it can serve very nicely, actually, as a powder over my makeup. And that this color is a very pretty powder that will go on very nicely and just give a little bit of brightening to my skin, regardless of whether I'm just wanting more brightening in general or because my foundation shade is slightly off. So even though I don't see this being used as a blush for me, I do think I may be able to get some use out of it. And what I will insert at this point is that another product from Nars sort of has that same function. This is called the Multiple, and this is basically a orgasm type shade. It again has that a little bit of a shimmer to it, but it's in this stick. And the idea is that you can just put it on your face either under makeup or on top of it, but I would mostly use it on top of makeup. And it just gives a little bit of a glow. And from the user reviews that I have read on the website, it looks to me like mostly older women like this product, and it's something that they can just throw on their skin, and that they say, oh, my husband says that when I put this on that I look really great, and all I did is just put this little stick on. So I think there's might be something to this. Now it does have a lot of shimmer to it, and so again, when you're using it, you may find that it is too shimmery, and that maybe introducing just a little bit of something that's just pink powder that doesn't have any shimmer in it at all might be better. So see, when I put that on, even in the viewfinder for the camera, I look a little bit sweaty now, and I think that in real life it actually is starting to look, have that goldness to it. So I'm not sure that this is the product that I think that people necessarily are going to want to buy, but I think that this concept of adding just a little bit of pink to the skin is a nice one, something that goes beyond just using blush. And I think that that really desaturated blush that's called Sex Appeal, I think that could work for some other people besides me. It was more just a mistake for me, but I think I can get some use out of that. And then I am fond of peach blush, and I do kind of like this shade Gina, so I earlier swatched this against some of the other peach blushes that I own, and so you can take a look at that. And since I have that Dior blush out this morning, I will swatch it next to that, and you can see what you think of that as well. So what I have here, I have at the top the Nars blush in Gina, and then underneath that I have the Dior blush in Coral. It looks certainly like the Nars blush is a little bit darker. I do feel like with this Dior blush that regardless of how much I put on my skin, it just kind of disappears. I don't think that it looks bad. It's not a formula that I'm that crazy about either. I think that the new Nars formula, at least so far, is a nicer formula, but in any case, I think this is kind of in the same color family, really. So now let's talk about the formula for the blush and whether or not you can expect that it should work out for you. So the first question is why they reformulated it at all and why they didn't just leave it alone. And I would guess that one big impetus for this is the fact that they wanted to remove the talc, and that this is something that seems to be a trend or something that really beauty companies are feeling like they're being forced to do. So in Europe, there is a lot of talk about not allowing talc in beauty products at all, and that is being discussed in some specific countries in Europe. And I think that really the only issue with talc is that there's potential for it to be contaminated with asbestos. And if the talc is contaminated with asbestos and then you breathe it in, then it has the potential of causing lung cancer or lung disease. And this has been mostly an issue with regard to baby powder. So people would take Johnson's baby powder or other baby powders that are made out of talc, and they would, after their shower, then they would put a whole lot of the talc on, and it would create a big cloud of dust in their bathroom, and then they would breathe some of that in, and they would do that every day for 20 years, and then the sense was that if you did this and the talc was contaminated with asbestos, then this could be causing lung disease even if you didn't have any other exposure to asbestos. And I think that probably has some merit to that argument. And then in addition, there have been claims that the use of talc in the groin area has led to ovarian cancer for a number of women, and so that is another concern with regard to the use of talc in general. And I also saw in a series on HBO that there was one person who was a child who had gotten a eyeshadow palette from Claire's, I think, and she would play with the eyeshadow palette and the talc would go all over the place and create a big cloud, and then she ended up getting lung disease and blamed it on that eyeshadow palette. And there have been some studies done that try to figure out how common it is for talc to be contaminated with asbestos, and in some cases they found contamination in a lot of different cosmetic products. And then one study that I saw that was a few years later, they weren't finding any, which either suggests that there's a lot of variability there, or maybe that the cosmetic industry has done a really good job of cleaning up the cosmetic talc, and I'm not sure which of those it is. There are some brands that say that they are using talc, but that it is certified as asbestos-free. One complaint about that is that people say that in some cases that the talc is only being tested like 1/4 teaspoon for an entire ton of talc, and that just because 1 teaspoon of it is free of asbestos doesn't mean that the whole ton is free, and I don't know how much that is an issue. So it's kind of hard to tell, but my feeling is mostly that I don't want to be breathing in talc. So therefore that if I'm using an eyeshadow palette or a blush, and if it has a lot of fallout and there's a lot of dust floating around the room, then that makes me a little more hesitant. And if it's a loose powder, then I'm much more hesitant. But if it's something like a blush that's really not giving much kick up and I'm not using it all that often, then I'm less concerned. Now, one more issue is that the people who are really in danger from the talc issues are the people that are working in the talc mines. And I think that those people do have really high cancer rates. So from a societal point of view, it might be better to not have those people have that exposure, and that having talc mining is probably going to put some people at risk. So that is another thing to be thinking about. Now, there's 2 other things that they took out of the new version. They took out the dimethicone, so these are not silicone blushes anymore. And they also took out the phenoxyethanol. Now, phenoxyethanol is a preservative that is sort of similar to parabens. I personally do not feel like phenoxyethanol has been especially irritating for me, but there are some people that do have an issue with it. And in terms of the dimethicone, I don't want to use silicone-containing foundations too often because I think that it's probably not great for my skin to have that tight of a seal on it, that it seals in all kinds of dirt and microbial stuff and things that I really would not like to be quite so tightly sealed on my skin. But in terms of blush, I don't think that's really an issue. I think that silicone blush has been okay for me. And the other thing about silicones, though, is that they're not good for the environment. They don't break down. And so, for instance, some companies like Mob Beauty, they don't use any silicones at all, and they've been very adamant about that just for environmental reasons. So I don't know that it's necessary for powder products to have parabens or phenoxyethanol or anything like that in them. This one does have a couple of ingredients in it that are classified as preservatives, which are the 1,2-hexanediol and the caprylyl glycol. And so it's not that it's entirely preservative free, but in general, I think that probably losing that phenoxyethanol in this particular product is not going to cause it to go bad. The question is whether or not it's going to continue to perform as it performs right out of the pan as time goes on, or if it's going to get dried up. And we're just going to have to see about that. Now, in terms of what I think of this product, in terms of the formula, I think that the thing that's most noticeable to me is that it really doesn't seem any different than the old Nars formula. And I think that the old Nars formula was fine and that this one is fine, and that if I didn't know that this was a new formula, I would have no idea. And I think that that was probably their idea, that they feel like people like the old formula and so they should just stick with it. Now, personally, I think, again, that the old formula is fine, but that is not the kind of formula that I have really been enjoying using in powder type blushes recently. So the blushes that I actually really like these days are ones that are really not powder blush, but they are kind of pretending to be powder blush. And those include these RMS blushes, and they include these Haus Labs blushes, and the Mob Beauty blushes are very nice, and there's a few other blushes on the market that are very similar as well. And so these are what are called baked gelée products, and they are ones that I feel like I can usually put on with my fingers and that feel really good on my skin and that blend really easily. In a lot of cases, they have things like squalane in them, so they're kind of a little bit creamy feeling and moisturizing. And when I use these particular blushes, then I usually feel like I end up looking really good, and the process of putting on the blush is really very pleasant, and that they just feel like a very nice experience to me. And that is the case with the eyeshadows that I really, really like also. So for instance, the YSL eyeshadows that I really like, and they are ones that I can put on with my fingers, but they seem like they're powder. And I think that all of these products are made in the same factory in Italy, and I think that these people have really done a big breakthrough in terms of making talc-free eyeshadows and talc-free blush and bronzers and other types of highlighters. And so I think that that's what really one thing that I look for is where things are made. So Nars has actually sold some blush like that themselves. So for instance, this Foreplay palette that I showed you before that has the Orgasm Rush in it. This one is a baked gelée formula, so you can see those engravings on the top in this one. I like this product also. Now, I don't know that I like this one as much as the Haus Labs one or the RMS one. I think this one doesn't have as much like squalane in it, and so it's not quite as soft, but I do think that these are very pleasant to put on and that they do look really pretty on me. I think that that gel texture also gives them a little bit of a translucence when they go on the skin that I think is very nice. So these blushes from Nars, the new ones that are in the individual containers, these are made in Canada and they are really just powder blush, and I haven't dropped them, but I think that they probably would break if you dropped them. So they are much more traditional in terms of the type of a formula, and I think that what they really did is just tried very hard to duplicate the old blush. And I do think that that is smart. If you have a product that people like and it sells a whole lot and it's at a price point that people like, then trying to find a way that people will say, this isn't any different than the old stuff, and it might be even a little bit better. That would be probably a very good business strategy. Now, in terms of the formula, as I said before, it does have the kaolin clay in it. That's the second ingredient. So I do think these are going to be a little bit drying on the face. I think that when they're talking about increased performance and this lasting for a long time, I think that's probably why that the kaolin clay is allowing it to stay on the face for a longer period of time. And I have tried wearing this blush myself in more challenging conditions, including going out when it was windy and raining a little bit and walking my dog for a couple hours and sleeping in it. And I think that it really did hold up quite well for me. I do think that when I put that Sex Appeal shade all over my face without putting down any foundation first, and then I wore it for a long period of time, I do think that started to dry out my face. So I think that there is a significant amount of kaolin clay in there, and that if that's what you're looking for, is something to be absorbing oil and staying in place, then that's something to know. But if you're otherwise, you can find yourself thinking that these are fairly drying. But I don't think that it's the case that if you like the old blush and you use this just as a blush, that you will probably notice the drying aspect to it very much. I think it only became noticeable to me when I put it all over my face. It's like a powder. But if I had just kept it right in this small amount of my cheek area, I don't think I would have really focused on that at all. So all in all, I think that this release for Nars has been quite impressive. I think that they did a good job of really making the new formula seem almost identical to the old formula, and that it does go on really nicely, and I think it might actually, as they say, have a longer staying power. And I certainly will be interested in seeing how these hold up and how they are holding up for me 6 months from now or a year from now. But in general, I think that they did a really good job with this, and I am really happy to see that, especially the Orgasm Edge shade, because I think that if you want to take people that like that shade but that don't necessarily want all that shimmer these days, that has turned out to be a very pleasing shade for me anyway. And so now what I'm going to do is put on a full face of makeup using some of the blush shades and then some of my other newer Nars makeup products, and I will insert some footage of me putting on the makeup and then just talk about each product. So for my quick makeup look, I would usually start with a concealer under my eyes, and they do not make a color corrector. And they do make a couple of concealers, but I haven't had good luck with either of those. Those are on the older side. There's this one, which is supposed to be very, very popular, which I haven't found has performed that well or felt that great to me in terms of how it felt on my skin. And this one is sort of like a skincare product, and it's also a number of years old, and it has retinol palmitate in it, and I have found that this irritates my skin some, and I don't think that this one looks as good as many of the other cream concealers that I use either, so hopefully at some point they will do a refresh in terms of their concealer line. And I think that they can do it because they did come out with an eye brightener that goes under the eyes last year, and I think that that is actually a really nice product in terms of not emphasizing the texture and feeling good, and it wears pretty well. The issue for me is that I'm really not that crazy about eye brighteners under my eyes. I think that I do much better with color correctors or even just a concealer. I don't think that this area needs to be brighter. Now, I have worn that underneath the Nars foundation, and I think that that works fine, so I would like to use that. I'm not sure what I did with it this morning, so I will just say that if I wear this under a foundation, I think it does work reasonably well for me, and it is a nice product. So what I ended up doing for my under eyes is just using a little bit of my trusty Bobbi Brown color concealer in the shade Light Bisque, and I always do like this one, and I have to go and get out my new tube of this because I have used it all the way down to the end. And then I thought I would put on their light reflecting foundation, and this is the only foundation that I feel comfortable with. This was released about 2 years. It doesn't have any silicone in it. I think the ingredient list in general looks quite good. I haven't had any irritation from it. So it is a medium coverage foundation, and that is usually a little heavier than what I I wear. I don't think that this one sinks into my wrinkles and makes me look worse than the way that many medium coverage foundations do, but I also think it's just a little more coverage than I need, and it's also not as moisturizing as I prefer. So I convert this into a tinted moisturizer most of the time by mixing it with a moisturizer, and the one that I usually use is from the Outset. This has worked really well for me with regard to all of the foundations that I have mixed it with, and I really do like this product from Scarlett Johansson's brand a lot. And so I just used a small amount of this Nars product, and then I mixed it with a small amount of this, and then I just spread it all over my face. And this Nars product is in the color Salzburg, and I think it's a little too yellow for me. I think that it's not terrible, but I do think that I would be better off with a different shade. And the next one, I'm waiting for my foundation to dry. I put a little bit of this concealer on my eyes as a eyelid primer, and this is the Haus Labs concealer. So I sometimes do use this as a concealer on the rest of my face. I think that if I put too much of it under my eyes, and especially if I put it in this area over here, that it does emphasize texture a lot, but I do think that I can use it very sparingly on especially like this part of my eyes, in the middle part where there really aren't too many wrinkles. But I mostly like it as a eyelid primer. I think that it goes on really nicely. It's never irritated my eyes, and my eyelids are very sensitive. And I find that it gives a kind of a tacky and a slightly rubbery type of a finish that I think has worked really well for me with a variety of powder eyeshadows. And I have that in the shade 05, which is Fair Peach. And then I just wanted to do a really quick brow look because I'm trying to keep this look down to about 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes at the most. So I am using my Jones Road brow pencil in the color Ash. So this is the one brow pencil that I have that I don't feel like I need to use it in conjunction with the brow gel. And the reason for that is because there's little fibers in the pencil. So when I put it on, it actually makes it look like I actually have real brows and that it's not just a pencil drawing on there. And I think this has worked really, really well for me. And the majority of the time I use this as my brow pencil, and I do use this every day. Occasionally I will use a combination of another brow pencil and a brow gel, and I think that that look may be even more natural looking, but it does take considerably more time, and so this is what I use almost all the time. And then next, I got out my Orgasm eyeshadow palette. I thought that we would kind of make this into Returned Orgasm. And so this palette has a variety of shades in it, which are mostly pinks and golds and neutral brown type colors. And so what I tend to do with my eyeshadow looks is I put a little bit of color on the movable part of my lids. I usually choose a kind of a not too bright color for that, not too saturated. And I put that on the movable part of my lids and then a little bit higher because otherwise you can't really see the color very much, and it kind of opens my eyes rather than making them look like they're too deeply set into my face. So I've watched a number of eyeshadow tutorials on how to handle hooded eyes or how to handle more mature eyes, and so these are the basic tips that I have picked up and that I tend to use. But if you have other suggestions, then you can let me know, and I'm open to the idea of being better at putting on eyeshadow. I don't think I'm all that great at it. Then I ended up using, for this look, I usually put a little bit of some color on the outer part of my eyes just to try to kind of balance things out a little bit more. And for this one, I reached for this color that's right in the middle, which is quite pink, much more pink than I would usually put on my eyes. That was rather adventurous of me. And I do think that this eyeshadow look started out looking like my eyes were way too red and a little bit odd looking. But I tried to balance that out by putting a little bit more gold over the top, and I took this darkest shade of the brown that's down in the bottom corner, and I put that on with an eyeliner brush so that it would just look like I was wearing some kind of an eyeliner. And I think that by the time I did all of those things and kind of balanced it out and then put on the rest of my makeup, I still feel a little shocked because my eyes do look a little bit more reddish or pinkish than I usually look, but I think it's looking okay. I think you can tell me what you think. So I see on the NARS website today that a number of their eyeshadow palettes and blush palettes have gone on sale for 50% off. So I think that that is a pretty good deal. I do really like those products. And so I will list the products that are available on the site here, and I will put a link in the description box. Now, I don't have from NARS a powder to set my makeup. I need to buy this perfecting powder that I have not yet purchased. I didn't realize that this was only introduced like last year. I seem to have missed that introduction. And I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me because it talks about how it's good for people with oily skin and that it absorbs sebum. But I think that maybe over a glowier type of a foundation, or in the summer when I might be sweating, I think it might be worth trying. So I need to pick that up. So as a little bit of an update, after I finished filming this video, I went to the Sephora at Kohl's that is near me, and they actually did have this perfecting powder in the color that I wanted, which was Creek. So I did pick that up, and so far it seems like it's going to work out nicely for me, especially for times when I am wearing either a cream type of a foundation or maybe when it's summer. So I'm going to have to try to give this a bit of a try over different kinds of foundations and then report back on it, but I feel like so far it's been very nice on my skin and hasn't been irritating. There's also a light reflecting powder from NARS that is more than a decade old that I have used, and I think that this has actually been okay for me also. It hasn't irritated my skin, and I only have it in the sample size, and I haven't felt motivated to buy a larger size and start using it regularly, but I think that that is something that you could consider also. And so what I thought I would do is to use this blush, which is in the color Sex Appeal, which is really doesn't show up as a blush on my face, and just kind of put that gently over my whole face. And I think that the more that I use this as a powder over foundation, the more that I think it actually works fine for that, and that the kaolin clay is oil absorbing, so that it's actually a fairly fine formula, and I think that it looks kind of nice when I do that. So that's what I did here. And then I use one of my NARS bronzers to just add a little bit of bronziness to my look. And this is the lightest shade, which is the shade 00, I think it is. So until recently, this was the lightest powder bronzer that I owned. Now recently I did pick up the two lightest shades in the YSL powder bronzers, which I think are just available still at Nordstrom. And I do think that the lightest one is lighter than this one. So if you're interested in that kind of bronzer, then please watch my upcoming bronzer video on that. And you can, I will try to make it clear just exactly what shade it is. But this one I think has worked okay for me, and it just gives a little bit of a bronziness to it and kind of starts to calm down that pink on my eyes a little bit. And then I'm using this Orgasm Edge, which is the Orgasm without the shimmer in it, that is about the same color as the original Orgasm, and I'm just putting a little bit of this on my cheeks. And now I am putting on just a little bit of the NARS liquid blush in the shade Orgasm. So I really love these liquid blushes. I think that the colors are really gorgeous, and I love the way that they look. But they do tend to fade fairly quickly, so therefore I have taken to just using them on top of powder blush. So NARS has released 3 lip products over the past 3 years that I really like, and these are the products. So this one is called the Nars Powermatte, and this is like a serious matte lipstick. It will stay on your lips for a very long time. I need to use this over a lip primer like MAC Prep and Prime, and it feels kind of dry, but it really lasts for a long time, and I have found that it's perfectly wearable for me if I put it on over a primer. And then sometimes I will put a lip balm like the Isamaya lip balm over the top of this. But today I'm going to use the other 2 products. So the second one is this lip crayon, which is called the Powermatte Lip Pencil. This is actually really poorly named because it's really not a lip pencil at all. It is a lip crayon. And so I feel that this is one of my favorite lipsticks that's matte. It feels kind of nice on my lips. It doesn't feel drying. It's kind of a compromise between a lipstick that's going to last forever, but it does last pretty long, and I think that these have been highly overlooked, maybe in large part because of that name. So for this one, I'm putting it on in the shade Valkyrie, which is a little bit pink, but not as pink as the other things on my face to kind of balance it out. But then I thought I would top it with this lipstick, which is the Afterglow Sensual Shine Lipstick. It's more like a lip balm. And one of the colors that I have is the Orgasm shade, so I thought that this would provide just a little bit of a gloss and a tiny bit of a shimmer on the top of the Powermatte lip pencil. So whether or not you like the look of my face with all of this pink on it, I don't know. I think for a spring look, it's kind of pretty. It's definitely a little more pink than I usually go, but I think it's not unflattering for my complexion, and I do think that for spring especially, it's kind of nice. And it might look a little bit retro, but I don't think it looks bad in this way. Certainly, I think that when I put on the Nars Orgasm with the shimmer in it, I definitely feel like it's a little bit too retro and that I'm not liking it as much. But I think that this kind of a more muted look, I think this is kind of nice. But regardless of what you think of the colors, I do really like the formulas for all of these products. I think that they're all really, really nice. So I'm looking forward to Nars coming out with more products soon, because I think that they're really on a winning streak as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you ever tried the Nars blushes, then please let me know which shades have worked for you, or whether or not the Nars Orgasm in either the new shade or the old shades look nice to you. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, then please go ahead and do that. And Coco and I love you very much, so thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.